I call this meeting of the Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The time is 6:01. Roll call, Priscilla?
All board members are present except for Jerry Perkins.
And Mr. Perkins is actually at the National School Board conference in Washington, D.C. right now. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I just want to thank everyone that is here for our budget workshop, our board workshop today on our budget. And especially want to welcome Dr. Ely to our first board meeting and board workshop and his second day on the job. So nothing like getting started right away.
Can't wait to talk money.
Yes. Next we have any public comments? There are no public comments. All right, so we are going to get started with our agenda, and we're going to start with a review of the historical information regarding Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City ISD budget, demographics, and staffing presented by Mr. Pruski.
Before we get started, Madam President, I'd just like to say a few words. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Pruski, our Chief Financial Officer, and his team who did a yeoman's work in putting together a tremendous amount of information that we'll be going over tonight. We'll be going over in a systematic manner, but we've got a lot of great information to share with the board and with the community. Just a reminder to everybody, this is a long process that we are embarking on now. It is just the first week of February, and we've got until the end of August where we'll ultimately come to you with a recommendation for a final budget. So our goal for tonight is to share a bunch of information that we can look at rules of thumb as we look throughout this budget development process over the next several months. Know that what you see tonight, much will change. And I guess we may be talking about this a little bit more later on, but I do want to talk a little bit about House Bill 3. House Bill 3 is landmark legislation that was passed during last legislative session, and it has impacted public school funding and funding here in SCUCISD a tremendous amount. The unfortunate thing is we don't know exactly how much it has impacted us yet. This budget development process will probably mirror a lot what it looks like during the legislative year. When we develop a budget during the legislative year, we know there's changes that go along through the spring as things change in the legislature. We are, with House Bill 3, the commissioner and the agency are still in rule-making mode in some of these things that we'll see, whether it's tax rate compression, reading academies, teacher incentive allotment, all those types of things. So our goal, as I said tonight, is a more of a higher level view of many of the big rocks, big parameters that we'll be discussing over the next several months. The other thing I'd like to say is we have, it's not new to me, this is my first meeting, but evidently we have a new microphone system here.
Yes.
Just so everybody understands, we don't have mics in front of you. I've been told that it will definitely pick up everything we have in the directional mics there. And so hopefully everybody who's watching this streaming or watching this on recording will be able to hear as well. So with that, I throw it to Mr. Pruski.
Mr. Pruski, can I say something real fast? I just wanted to let the audience know too that I know that we're looking at packets, and we'll have those up while Mr. Pruski is talking, as well as there's going to be a link tomorrow. It's going to be, what we're seeing is going to be on our website, and at the end we'll have time for public feedback as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction as well, Dr. Ely. There is a large amount of information for the review, purview, and high-level look at this. So if we would like to go ahead and get started. So the breakdown is like as it is on the agenda. It's a historical look, our demographics, tax information, budget information. We'll get into fund balance, debt service, some efficiency slides, the expenditure projection plan, then staffing information, special programs, and then HB3 impact, as was alluded to earlier. So if we could go through, and I'm going to start on slide 5 with our SCUC demographics. Thank you. This slide is a representation of, over the past years, of our annual student growth. You'll see the totals on the enrollment on the bottom, and then the line of the percent increase of our growth. And for 17-18, you can see the 17-18 and 18-19 leveling off there for about the 1% annual student growth there for the school district. That's going to come into play again for future budget planning moving forward. So on to the next slide. And again, as we go, if there's any questions, please feel free to stop me at here. I'm just going to continue to go until somebody's pausing me. So the annual enrollment growth then by grade level there, you can see it in the actual numbers. So the last, 2017 of 154, 2018 of 158, 2019 153. So you can kind of see where we're at there. The next slide is the demographic from our demographer report, and this shows the enrollment forecast. Due to the enrollment numbers received in the last couple of years, we will now be on what is the low growth model. So that's the green line following through there, and you can see the low to the moderate is not that wide of span, but we're going to be watching and following this carefully throughout. The district has seen in the past high numbers, as you see on the slide before on page 6, of 499 in 2013, 545 in 2014, but we're not seeing that now. Now that could very well change. As you go to the next slide, you'll see this is an overview. It's kind of hard to see there on the left side, but that's a snapshot of our district outlined in blue. And the 2 yellow circles there are the growth areas that we're watching. We continually mention the northeast segment of our district there, up along 35. Then as you move south, the south one, it's south of I-10, and that's the growth going on in there towards St. Hedwig in the ETJ areas. So we are monitoring this. The houses are going up. We've talked about this before, but this is just to keep an eye on. And this is what Mr. Perez and the facilities team also monitors weekly, looking at this information to follow these subdivisions into where we are. So what does that mean for the district? So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the grade level projections for 2020. So we're looking at as a total of 16,047 for snapshot numbers. And these are broken down by grade level across the board to the campuses. And as you look across, you can see the totals there for those campuses. So some of the campuses, we're not going to dive a lot into this, but we're going to keep a close eye on the Cibolo Valley area. That's that northeast segment up there, along with Sippel. And then also, as you can see on the totals there, watching our junior highs, seeing what those numbers reflect into that aspect. So slow growth model, but watching the housing development here and keeping our eyes and ears open to the news around with our cities. And that helps with our cities in our monthly communications as well as our weekly communications. Okay, so what does that mean? We inserted then also into a slide there with our 10-year facility master plan. And with the slow growth model now, if you remember, we had originally planned for a bond, I believe JD was in 19, and we have now, sorry, Mr. Mosley, we have now pushed it over, and that green line now is sitting at approximately 2023.
May of 2023.
May of 2023. And that is due to those previous years of what I showed, the 153, the 156, the slow growth, and us watching that. Now, that doesn't mean it's set in stone there. As you recall, that is a draft document. So what we're saying is that today's information is as we know it with our capacities. This is, if it continues that way and utilizing the demographer data, we will then see potential for a bond on or around that 2023. Again, it could slide earlier depending on growth bubble, something happens. It could also slide another year depending on on what we do there. But what I wanted to do there is to draw that focus there that the next tipping point for the timeline there is looking around 2023. Okay, I'm pausing.
Let me just add,
Yes, sir.
so, because it doesn't show the capacity here and where we stand as far as that goes with respect to each school.
Correct.
What schools right now are at the most risk of being over capacity or getting close to
Those are the ones I mentioned. Cibolo Valley. JD, if you want to.
So at today's number have, Cibolo Valley is at 82% of its max capacity, and SIPL is at 76% of its max capacity today.
How about the junior highs?
Junior highs, we'd be looking at Corbett's at 75 and Adobe's at 77. And those are max capacity, so that's considering using portables, as part of that, but still significantly below their max capacities at this point.
And I just think just word on the street is, I think people are perceive that our junior highs are already too crowded and issues that result from that. But you're saying based on the numbers, 75 and 77, we're nowhere near capacity.
Correct, sir.
Okay, is that a difference between perception and reality, or why would, it just seems like those are the schools that people say are overcrowded.
Well, and so again, I'm talking max capacities here. That's with portables. I mean, that's we've used portables in our district for a long time. So if you looked at a functional capacity of those campuses, we're at 95% at Adobe and 105% at Corbett. Now, your functional capacity is significantly reduced because of programs and different things like that are in your campus. And so we always expect to go significantly beyond functional capacity with the use of portables. So you may feel, like you're saying, Mr. Emmett, it may be the perception to feel that way. But there's, we still have capacity in the campus, in our core spaces, our cafeteria, our gym, et cetera.
Well, I was going to ask you about, are the core facilities being stressed?
And that's what that max capacity is based on that core capacity of how, we can put, go back to Cibolo Valley as an example, it's a 1,200 max capacity campus, they were designed to have that many students in the cafeteria,
yeah.
that many students in the gyms. And so it's not just the portable space, but it's the core.
Because the numbers are they're just not historical to what we've had, we've always had smaller schools and now they're not. It's just the nature of the economics of the situation.
Okay, so I think the word on the street has been we're looking at doing a junior high fairly soon, and back the old numbers were high school fairly soon, but we're looking at a new junior high not until 2026, basically.
As of today, we have that opening in 2026, yes, sir.
Okay.
And in the past, when we talked about the next bond, it always included the next high school. This one will not then.
Right now, it does not, ma'am.
Okay.
And again, that's monitoring the yearly data, the third
Right,
quarter
right.
reports, and the reports that we see intermittently between those as well. So, and again, they can slide forward, and we watch that carefully. But as of today, with those dates and the times, the data points that we have at today to date, this is what it reflects.
And I think the questions here are right on point. The two areas that we're most concerned watching are the first two areas that get addressed on a potential bond coming. So those are the two areas that we're watching the most closely.
I was also going to say, that'll also be discussed at the combined community advisory committee meeting,
Yes,
which
ma'am.
is February 13th, which will also be live streamed as well. So y'all go into that a little bit more.
Okay, so then on to moving on, so the historical then, these next slides are historical looks at the district on expenditures. So from the past 5 years, you can see our history on expenditures. And these include all funds. So this is moving from, as you see there, 2014 to 2018. And then revenue is on the next page. So historically, our revenue, you can see the balance of local to state and then to federal on top with the green. So again, what we've seen in the past. This year for 2019, it's approximately going to go to about 170. So then on slide 13, this is 199 funds budgeted per student by year. So you can see from 2015 to 2018, we were in the 7,000 range. And then for 1920 with the budget, we're about 8,400 there. Okay. So on our tax information, again, some historical look. This one we have the decade in, and you can see our tax history. Again, this is historical data. And the last column there on the right for 2021, that's the projected using the state average growth scenario of about 4.01%. So we plug that in just as a projection looking forward in there for 2021. So you can see there along, and this is going to be a couple of points here. For M&O, we will be compressed again. So using the state average growth scenario, we're looking at an M&O compression of 95, so 0.956. So 95 and roughly half a cent there after that. So, and then INS staying the same. Okay. So our tax base for the district, we included this slide just as a reminder. The residential roughly makes up over 75% of our district. And you can see the commercial there at a little over 16%. And it kind of hovers. We've actually dipped a little bit there. And then on the other. So the other is our vacant platted lots, as you see there, our agricultural space, special inventory, and rural land. So for the most part, even from our history, the residential is carrying the base. So slide 17.
The one thing that's also impacting us is exempt properties. That continues to go up every year.
Yes.
I think last I heard it was approaching 8% of properties are exempt. So those are off the tax rolls too. So that's going to impact this right here also.
Yes. So again, in the tax base, so what did you just, sorry about
Military, veteran, disabled veteran, over 65, you have.
Well, they're still taxed though.
Some are not.
Well, I know.
Actually, they're zeroed out.
Exempt is, sometimes it's freeze and sometimes it's
Yeah, that's
exempt.
true.
So
Right.
there's a big difference. Freeze is you're still paying taxes.
Over 65 is frozen.
Right.
We're thinking about churches and.
Yeah, churches,
Well, yeah,
things
So
like that.
is it the gross total value, is then 8% of that is exempted, or the number of properties 8%?
the last I heard it was approaching, it was over 7% of total properties in the district were some kind of exemption. Either they were frozen or they were totally exempt. And that's when I was on the appraisal district board, and I asked the chief appraiser, and that's what she gave to me. So there's quite a number of properties that have some level of either exemption or reduction in that. And that's going to factor in here at some point. Make it already is.
It is.
Considering we're one of only 5 districts in the state that have that issue, Killeen being one of them and others. So when you see a tax base in here, that tax base is reduced by those exempt properties or those, and it's significant, and it's going to get larger as time goes on. So
I believe the legislature took that up this past session, and as far as the cities go, they gave them a reprieve, but not school districts.
Is that right? Thank you.
He's not making the legislative.
So then to 17, the district golden pennies. So just a brief summary there. So that 8 available, we have 4 used, there are 4 available. So with HB 3, there is 1 available by unanimous board vote to the tune of about $1.8 million. You can see there that would, if that were to happen, this is a scenario, if that were to happen, that would leave 3 available there at about 1.8 each as well. We also broke it down, so the one penny from the local effort would be approximately $600,000, and the state effort then would be 1.2 million. So the full burden, it's the breakdown of what I would call a burden or the funding source of that penny. So you have, it's roughly 33% to 66% on that. Copper pennies, there's 9 available, none used, and there's 9 available again there. So that's just the information onto those pennies, so that's included. Okay, so then what was aforementioned on the future tax compression. So tax compression information passed by the 86th legislature. You can see there in 2019, 2020, we were compressed from $1.04 to 97 cents. And then projecting out now, looking at 2020 to 2021, our projected M&O compression being from 97 to 90.956. And again, this is that seesaw slide of what we're so used to, state aid versus local aid versus state. So districts are to be held harmless against any lost local revenue. So this is using the model of the state growth of 4.01. So depending on how our growth comes in, that factors into that formula. And we will receive that from the comptroller and from the state onto what value will go in there for our growth. So from what I gathered, that's what's going to come forward to the district.
So I'll just jump in here.
Yes,
So
sir.
what we're talking about there is if we have total assessed values that exceed the state average of 4.01, that will have an impact on our tax rate. It would cause further compression. However, it would not impact the actual revenue that we would receive. So we are guaranteed that entitlement based on our weighted average daily attendance. So unlike in the past, we would have to kind of think of tax rate calculation and revenue calculations a little separately based on the new system.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so then, so review, so the next section is on our budget information. So this is adopted budget information, put in there just as a review. So this was adopted in August of 2019. You can see therefore on the 199 funds of 134 million, and then for a total of all funds of 170 million. And then the breakdown on slide 22 by function. And you can see that this again was in the board presentation for the budget. That's the actual slide. So this was also adopted in 2019. Comparison of the 6200, 6300, and 6400. So the contracted services there on slide 23 are in blue. And you can see the historical movement there with the data fields in the bottom. Supplies and materials following in the 6300s, and then travel expenditures in the 6400s. So you can see the trend lines for those values there in the budget. And okay, so then the next group, the next section, would be on the fund balance on slide 24. So going to 25 then, you see the historical total of the district's fund balance. The past 3 to 4 years hovering above the 40 million mark. Onto the next slide, you'll see the actual breakdown there of audited ending fund balance. That's why you do not see one in 2019, 2020. It's not that we have a zero fund balance, it just hasn't been audited. So the only audited we go backwards to is 2018. So we had an audited fund balance ending at 43 and available, quote unquote, unassigned of about 7 million. Projected out, forecasted for this year, we're looking at about 10 possibly be in there. So the next slide then on 27 shows the fund balance along with the reserve of the 25% expenditures. So this is in there for our fund balance. Yes, ma'am.
That's with us moving that unassigned to, that assigned to the unassigned.
That is in that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, on to 28, our debt service information. You'll see our historical debt service INS tax rate. So the 45 cents previous 2 years and including this year. And then on the next slide, slide 30, I know on the left there it's kind of hard, but this is our debt service payment table for the upcoming future years up to 2046 as it sits now without any refunding. So this is what's in there. And then you can see on the right, we kind of pulled out into the box where it says fiscal year and payment. Those are 2018 through 2023 years are what our payments are. So your average 5-year payment, or the average for the payments over the next 5 years, about 29.8 million, so roughly $30 million. So that brings me to the next slide on slide 31. So this is on our INS fund balance projection. So what this shows is the expenditure is our payment, projected payment there. And you can see on the table that to the far right, the INS fund balance. So as we proceed down, you'll see the INS fund balance dipping down and actually projected out into 21, 22. being that $82,000 as a projection. Property values, which can come into play here. But you see there that we also have our next available refunding is in February of 22, which can actually be 90 days prior to. So that actually can get into the late fall of 21. So that could impact those numbers there as well. And I'll just stop there if there's any questions on that. Okay. Okay, so then a few slides on district efficiency information. The big one is class size waivers. So you'll see here the history of our waivers. This year we have a number of 47 waivers, which equates to 13 teachers, and the estimate of savings there being $845,000. And we use that for that block of years there. You can see the historical values there in our most recent trend. So just as a reminder, a waiver is not equal to teacher. Ms. Cannon?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's the number of teachers saved on those waivers there. So the next slide, with all transparency here, I found this and I stole this from a previous presentation that Ms. Maloney did a couple years ago. So I looked it up for this year. This is texassmartschools.org, and it's kind of hard to see, and I apologize on there, but basically, it's, as you see there, the spending index is a low spending for Schertz-Cibolo. So we're low spending, but the achievement or the academic progress. So if you look at the box to the right, it's actually backwards. So it's, as you can see there at the 0 on the grid box, there's the 12,000 per student, then it goes to 10, 8, and 6, and the red dot is SCUC. So as you go to the right, it's less spending, and as you go up, it's academic progress. So we want to be in that top right quadrant, and that's where we are according to Texas Smart Schools. Okay. Just as a reminder, our 2018-2019, our first rating, we received an A superior, district score of 90, based off of the 17-18 audited data. We do have some challenges that we're watching, and some of those scores were based off of growth models of our past student growth. So as you saw, this year and the previous 2 years being at the 150-ish number of kids. So we're gonna have to watch that on future ratings and our scores there. EPP. So on the EPP, I think everybody in here, we're familiar with the EPP plan. That's our expenditure projection plan on items that are not built into the budget. So you can see on 2019, 2020, we have the total of 7.3 million. However, we have taken the first part of that through a budget amendment early on in September, I believe, August, September timeframe. But we didn't do all of that. So, and that's on a later slide. We have it broken down. I'm sorry, it's not on that one. But as the budget year, so this is something that we watch as the budget year goes through. So we did the front end of it, and we'll look to see how we're ending up as we follow through on our monthly forecasts and watch our budget, watch our vacancies, see what's available, how that impacts as we get down. Because vacancy, employee vacancies are dollars saved. And as we get down towards the end of the budget cycle, the EPP conversation may or may not start back up. This is historical, what we've done in the past. So, and this also shows what is projected for the future. So you can see those totals there at the bottom on the EPP. Okay, so now we get into district staffing. And just as a reminder, 1920, the budget was roughly 83.5% of our Fund 199 was allocated to staffing. So this is where most of our budget is allocated towards. So on slide 39, you'll see the staffing numbers through that color graph from 15-16 to current. And you can kind of see the breakdown by teachers, campus professionals, non-campus professionals, paraprofessionals, and auxiliary. So it's just the color heat map, so to speak, for information. And our total at this time was at snapshot 15,925 was our students, and our total staff of 1993.
I'll just say largest employer in Baldwin County.
But, obviously, the 1920 represents the increase in capacity that we had from House Bill 3 and our ability to address some significant campus needs, especially in the area of special education. So obviously, you were all around for that discussion there, and it's very happy that we were able to address some extensive needs that we had in that area.
Something that I also was following through a former template, the administrative cost ratio. So I know it's small writing there, but to get the score, you see the blue arrow. If we have our ADA size of 10,000 or above, we have to be below 0.08, and our admin cost ratio is at 0.06. So it's another metric on the first indicator. Just wanted to share that information as well. So moving forward then, so our biggest number of employees is teachers. So we can see here our teacher turnover percentage comparison to our regional counterparts. You see Comal, Northeast, East Central, Northside, Judson, and then SCUC being green. So from 2014 through 2018. 2019 is available, but
Yes.
it was not, we didn't put it into this one just yet. So I think it's 10%.
Do we have our regional counterparts? Do we have regional counterparts?
Yes, we're, I think Northside is below us and the others are above us, and the state's above us.
So then, just as a reminder, the SCUC staffing guidelines, so these are the guidelines followed by the district on staffing the campuses, and just there's a couple of pages of those, that those were put in. So that gets us to page 46. So this is a not final number, and what this is the district position requests broken down by the area there. So operations, instruction, special education, and you see the total, and these are positions requested, totaled up into there. So on operations, 1.3, instructional 3.7, and special ed 1.2, for a total of $6.3 million worth of position requests. These are not filled. These are requested by those areas, and again, not final as we're shaking those through.
These have not been approved.
Right, these are not approved. Okay, so what does the staffing cost to the district? So out of Fund 199, you see there on the next slide on page 47. So again, as the aforementioned, so to 2018, 2019, and then to 2019, 2020, the increase there. So right now we're sitting $112 million for staffing costs. That is budgeted. So again, that's budgeted full. Everybody's here, everybody's fully staffed. It's not always the case, but that we have to budget for that for the positions that are available there. So then the next slide, and we have seen this before, but I inserted it again for information, the teacher salary comparison chart. So you can see the districts down on the left and across the top, SCUC in yellow. So at the first year, you see our first year teacher pay, and then as you can see across the board, by 5th year, 10th year, 15th year, 20, 25, et cetera. So, and then also a comparison of the health insurance benefits on this chart as well.
Blaine, this is the first time we've seen this with the House Bill 3 changes, correct?
Yes, yes. I just meant the general format.
No,
of what
oh,
y'all
yes,
said.
yes, but these are with the House Bill 3 increases that we weren't really sure where we were gonna shake out, so.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, so 49, this is a breakdown of 2019, 2020, so this year. So the number of employees, and this is just informational, the spread of where our staff, where they are, what category. So you can see counselors, librarians, nurses, administrative campus, administrative non-campus, professionals, diags, paraprofessionals, special ed, you see all those there. So for a total of, this one is at the time of this chart was 1994, so it's one off from the other one. But as we go through, but you see there by departments as well down below. Okay, so budgeting. So what are the budget impacts? So just on these areas, I'll explain this. This is part of, we'll get to this slide again at the budget parameter memo towards the end of the presentation. But these are budgetary numbers for per teacher, paraprofessional special needs, transportation, and child nutrition. And most of that makes up what we call our basic services category for budget. So by growth, these are the dollars that we use into the budget factors. Okay, the next slide. So expenditure per student by program. So you can see there on the left, we have regular program, all students, and then the breakdown by the special programs, the CTE, special ed, bilingual, GT, and at-risk. So as you go across from left to right in the years, you can see the dollars allocated, expended per student during those timeframes. Okay. All right, so the aforementioned House Bill 3 impact to SCUC. So not to read this, but there are 3 and others. So there's other mandated programs that are coming on, but also the early education, which includes pre-K and the reading academies, the dyslexia program, and college career military readiness. And as you may recall, during the budget process last summer.
Wayne, I'm sorry.
Sir.
Can we go back to 51?
Yes, sir.
You know, we're basically spending $100 more now for regular ed students than we did 6 years ago. And all the other ones have increased dramatically. What is the reason for that? Why? Because we've gone from 7,200 to 10,000 special ed. Bilingual is, triple. So GT is double, basically.
So I can certainly speak to special ed. Remember in 1920s when we added all those additional staff that are coded to special ed. And so we were finally able to catch up on that. And then,
like several of those, it's catch up as well when you look at some of those special programs and the additional students related to that.
Okay.
Some of it's the allotment that's specialized or categorized for those particular student groups as well. But a lot of that is trying to catch up with that and allow with the student growth as well.
Okay. But now, the spending in the regular ed situation, that's all students. So that would encompass some GT, some CTE, some of the at-risk money. So when you say you're only spending $3,300, you're really spending more than that on those students.
yes, there's.
If they're in one of those populations, which more than likely they're going to be in something. So, okay, all right.
So I'm kind of curious too with the weights that the state gives. Have their weights changed in these percentages as well?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
So special ed weights changed by disability category. The biggest change that we had was in state comp ed. And that's our percentage, and actually not even percentage, but the density of students from poverty. So that went up significantly, and there's a range. There's 5 bands, tiers between 22.225 and 0.275. So those were increased. We added dyslexia allotment this time of 0.1, and so there was some significant change with House Bill 3.
So what I'm getting at is if these weights changed over here, then we will see a significant increase on some.
Because we'll see some revenue, we'll see revenue increases as well.
Yeah, I was just curious about I know that we increased the special ed spending because of the staff members that we added. And I know we've done some things in CTE as well. And I was just curious. Okay, thank you.
I have one question. Is this in real dollars? Actual dollars?
It is actual dollars, it's not inflation adjusted.
So if you take inflation into account from 31.97 to 14.15 to 32.97, 19.20, the average inflation during that time is about 2.5%. We're actually spending less per student today than we were 6 years ago, based on the cost of providing that service. That's something I think the public doesn't really understand, is that we're actually behind the 8 ball on actually spending for public education. When you throw inflation in that mix. I mean, special ed, that was something we need to catch up because that was behind and we need to catch that up. But if you look at the overall number, we're spending $100 more per student, which is about, 3%? And inflation during that time is at least 15.
Mr. Finley, I think that's a good point, and I would point out to the group that the previous funding system did not have inflation drivers built into it. Neither does the new system under House Bill 3. And so we did get through the great work of the Texas House and Senate by committing over $11 billion to tax rate reduction and to increase in public education. They did infuse Texas public schools with additional resources. What they weren't able to do was index that with other drivers. Really, how you increase each year is increase your weighted average daily attendance, so more students in those weighted areas.
In a district that doesn't, growing at 150 students a year, that's not going to be a significant increase to get that additional funds. So our inflation is still going to go up, but the 150 is more likely not going to cover that additional outlay.
Mr. Pruski is going to get to some early revenue, not projections, but thoughts, and then we'll be able to work through that as we work through the process. Your point is well made, and I think that is what we find ourselves in this district, and you guys have known that as well for a long time, and so that's just that's the parameters that we're having to work through.
Yeah, I just want to point out for the public that this, you look at these numbers, you kind of go, we got more money, well, you really don't. But points well taken. Thank you.
Okay, so to the House Bill 3 impact, so challenges are still there. And as Dr. Ely mentioned earlier on, some of the information, we're still continuing to learn about these requirements for these programs. And it's also important to know that some of these programs have required spending requirements. And two there, dyslexia and early ed, have that 100% spending requirement there. So on the next slide, slide 54, it's a breakdown of the mandated programs. So special ed, dyslexia, CTE, state comp ed, bilingual, early education, college, career, military readiness, and gifted and talented. So you can see as you go across, just going on from left to right. So there's a revenue projection there of 12.2 million, 55% spending requirement. So the mandated spending amount would be 6.7. The budgeted amount for this current school year for special ed is 19 million. That's it. That's including the whole program, so staffing, everything. So if you take the difference of the budgeted amount from the mandated spending, it's about $12 million, 12.4 difference from the budget there. So you can kind of see the allocations as we look there. Now, some of these on the early ed, if you drop down, early education, $1 million, 100%. And I'm going to go through some information about that here on the next couple of slides. But some of this is still being worked out. So it's a very fluid and changing landscape. And I think moving forward now, I think we have a better understanding of where I can say we have a better understanding of what we have now compared to what we had at the summertime, or even August, September, October. We now have more of a defined parameter set there. So this is the information there for the mandated programs. I wanted you guys in the audience to see that. So one of the big talking points here for then on the mandated programs is the SCUCISD pre-K plan. So just jumping right in there. So in 2019-2020, SCUC is to apply for the waiver for pre-K. Now, a district in Texas can apply for one waiver for 3 years, twice.
Can I just jump in?
Yes, sir.
Just a reminder, we still offer half-day pre-K in this district. What we're talking about is full-day pre-K.
Full day. So, thank you. Full day pre-K. So coming through from House Bill 3. So now we are to apply for a waiver, and then that is to get us for the planning session or the planning period, then to start an implementation phase-in plan in 2020-2021 school year. So that you can see there is to implement full day pre-K at 2 campuses for a cost of that $400,000. That's estimate. That's an estimated cost there. And then you see the rest of the plan there for the next 2 years. So 2021 to implement that at 3 campuses, full day pre-K. And then in 22-23, we should be all full day pre-K the elementaries, at all 8 elementaries. Is there anything that I missed on that?
Part of the waiver process is that to work with our area providers for daycare, instead of meeting up to a public meeting for them to come in and look at, are there any eligible providers? Are there any that are eligible, that are willing to partner with us? And then bringing back a conversation to the board, do we want to even partner with, if there are any available, or follow the plan similar to what we've talked about? So there's a couple of steps in between there before we get to the actual waiver application in March.
Mr. Prisky, how many are recurring cost of that? Is that all recurring cost in there, or is that, no? Because some of that's facility, is it correct? I know the staffing is recurring
Staffing will be
cost,
recurring.
is only,
So that includes the portables, so we may need to, no,
Portables are not eligible under that alone.
because we don't have room, right? That was one of our issues we talked about before, was space.
some cases.
Whether or not we have a portable or not, it's not eligible it's not a part of that number right there.
Gotcha.
Then, okay, then moving on, the next program wanted to highlight then is the Reading Academies. And I am going to turn this Reading Academies slide over to Dr. Edwards, because this is changed as of yesterday.
So we
This
had,
is I'm sorry.
okay,
What you see here on the slide is not the plan of what's moving, what we have now. Is that fair? Okay.
yeah, so there was a lot of information. Actually, almost every session as part of midwinter had something to do with this legislation or House Bill 3. There was a tie-in at each one of them. I think many of us came out of there thinking, you know what, on the Reading Academies, there is more unknown than there is known at this time, especially with those that are going to be providing that professional development. So we talked about kind of tapping the brakes a little bit. And so this next year, we would either consider a small cohort possibly going through there and not going full-fledged for another year until there's a better understanding of what these academies are going to look like and how it's going to impact our district. We do have some opportunities to send a few staff members, hopefully, to preview some of the materials and get familiar with some of those and be able to provide some feedback. So we're actually looking at punting what we have here back a year and tapping the brakes and not moving forward with it with a full grade level or anything like that this next year.
Dr. Evans is correct. There were some changes that have been made as recently as a couple of weeks ago at the state level. In fact, the summer training that they were going to be able to provide this summer has been moved back to August. I don't know. It'd be very difficult for districts across Texas to send their folks to training during August as we're coming back to school, and other districts are as well. They've already added a third year into the rollout. It is, the agency is in a difficult situation. They have roughly 140,000 educators in K through 3 that they've got to figure out how to set up these reading academies for. So Texas is a big and diverse state with lots of educators. So I think as they are going through their process of determining how to roll this out, timelines are starting to be pushed, and I appreciate Dr. Edwards and Student Academic Services for amending, even in the last couple of days. And let's get a try with a few of our folks in this first year and see how it goes, and then we'll continue to update our planning assumptions based on that.
We don't plan for the estimated cost to change, rather than part of that cost being absorbed next year. We're looking at those 2 years when we look at those type of things.
And it's going to be intensive for those teachers. I'd rather it be fully
Right. It is a
good professional development when they actually go through it. So.
What they're estimating is the equivalent to 10 8-hour days of training and they have to be completed within an 11-month period, or they can't get credit for that academy and would have to retake the academy. So they have 11 months to get in those 10 8-hour days. As it's currently constructed.
Very good.
Okay. So then that brings us to the budget planning process. So moving forward, then I'm going to send the. Yeah, we can't. It's hard to see. Sorry, it was a challenge. No. So what's being passed around and handed out is the most current draft of the budget parameter memo for 2020-2021 budget. Again, we are in February, so this is the first workshop setting to review this, and we will probably see this for months to come as we watch and analyze data throughout. So, just for those following at home, there we go. So on page 1 then, what you have there, just jumping into the table, is a column of assumptions, and then in the middle, considerations, notes, and then on the far right, budget implications as we know, or best forecast as it sits today. So line 1, we've talked about it, it's our enrollment. So this is the assumption moving forward, following the low growth scenario. So as a reminder, snapshot time frame was 15/9/23. As of January 31st, we've closed that gap, and we're basically -2. And Mr. Perez informed me before the meeting started, we are at.
He's just -1. We
We're-
get ones.
We tried. So moving forward, the consideration for budget planning is on the conservative nature, following that low growth model of the about 100 kids there. You see that on the far right with the budget implications. So looking at 2020 projection of 16,047. So line 2 then on the state funding, SCUC to maintain current formulas. Following that, watching our trends into those departments and to our campus budgets. We are initiating a new pilot program on the budget planning process, so we can address that here. So I'm sure it's going to be talked about. We discussed with campus principals at a roundtable last month that moving forward, looking at starting their budget at about 80% fully funded. Actually, that's a contradiction. Funding them at 80%. And then watching the enrollments come in, so that snapshot then fully fund them afterwards or seeing where they land. So that takes the concept of a campus in the past would not meet their projection, but they still got their allotment back in August, September. So looking forward, we're looking at those formulas there. So following that roll forward, then also the growth assumption, we talked about that with the state compression. So right now using that 4.01%, property value growth index, HB3 compressed at another tax rate, the state to make up the offset and monitoring the tax cap. So all that said, going into line 4 on the tax rate. So our tax rate, the M&O tax rate, as mentioned, will be compressed further. At this time, keeping INS tax rate the same. So looking at 2021, the compressed tax rate, looking at that being 9.956498. The potential M&O gain of that roughly is about $2 million. Okay, so then on number 5, there is through House Bill 3, the 1 penny available through unanimous board vote. So put that in there. We talked about that on the presentation, and you see the same information there. 1 golden penny projected to yield $1.8 million. And then the local and state as the share of that burden, the tax effort on there.
See, that was a unanimous board vote of all present.
All present, yes, ma'am. The TRE is in line 6. So if the district were to, or the information is there for the golden pennies available to consider through election, this must be voter approved in November if it were to go on a uniform election date. But again, the reminder is prior to even doing this, we would have to fulfill the efficiency audit required by law. And at this time, those rules are still being worked on. And we're in February. So there's the effort there by the pennies. Okay, so now this is where we kind of changed this year, and this is more than likely the terminology. The process is probably going to stay the same, but the terminology may be a little different. So we'll just go through it. So number 7, basic services staffing due to growth. These are those positions we've done in the past. We grow a certain number. We need teachers, bus drivers, child nutrition, custodians. So there, you see the staffing for annual growth there, the budgetary number, and then what we're looking at moving for 2021 school year on the far right. And that's the 5 teachers, 4 paras, 4 pre-K, 2 transportation, and 2 child nutrition. The teachers included in there are for the full day pre-K. So the phase-in process includes some pre-K teachers. Yes, sir. The full day pre-K
And we
phase-in.
typically do that in March, again.
So we were looking to bring it to the board. Just where they're, and then bring it for March.
So what happening is we have the basic services, what we talked about in number 7 prior to that. And then you see there that it's broken down further, other campus services, which per the staffing guidelines, there's others to be considered. Enhanced services, so that's an example. These are examples. These are not, this is not only ones considered, but these are just examples for those. So enhanced services could be custodial, GT coordinator, instructional specialist, technology specialist. So, and as mentioned there on the right, total cost for all there. So as we go forward, and as Ms. Cannon alluded to, there'll be a discussion item for the basic services. Senior leaders are also now going to start evaluating requests brought in by department leads and directors to see what is going to go into the next column and to see where we are budget-wise.
And those by staffing guidelines for the other services such as assistant principals, counselors, things like that.
So that's the new piece there this year. Okay, so then on the pay raise, we've gone through that. Future pay raise scenario is pretty close to the same as what it's been. So for every % is approximately $1 million. We will continue to use the assumption of the class size waivers. So to continue those for, that should be 2020. And to have that cost avoidance, as you saw on the slide before, approximately $845,000. So now,
I'm gonna pause right there. That
Yes.
is 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade on the class side for the waivers, correct? Sorry,
that's okay.
making sure
No,
everybody
thank
knows
you.
what we're talking about when we say class size waivers. Yeah, so our kinder and first, we leave it our 22-to-1 ratio that the staff requires, and then we go up to 24.
So again, following HB3 implications and costs, and as you see on the far right, you see the list in the middle, but the far right costs are still being evaluated. So looking at the pre-K phasing plan, we listed that one 19 through school year of 2022. We're looking at that as a budgetary number for an estimate, but we're also cautious on awaiting the rules from the commissioner and from TEA. So next 3 lines then, the assumptions for revenue. So again, the compressed tax rate. So we're looking at a projected M&O revenue today of the compressed tax rate. So we're looking at a projected M&O revenue today of about $2 million. State formula, no change in the funding formula, as there would be no change in basic allotment. So projected no change there. And then additional possible revenue possibilities are the 2 that we mentioned already on the front page. So the board vote and a possible the TRE election.
I'll just jump in here. This process, I always caution, don't ever fall in love with the first number. I know we always remember the first number, but just understand that it's going to go up and down as we proceed.
And this is an internal calendar for the budget process on close my pen, slide process on close my pen, slide 60. So where we sit now is in the February 4th timeframe. So you can see there's a lot of work to happen as we go through there. Is in the February 4th timeframe. So you can see there's a lot of work to happen as we go through there, especially in the month of February through March 27th. They're working with campuses, departments, and principals. I'm not going to read that whole table there. We all can all see that. And then for all sakes purposes on the presentation slide, That's the end. We were going through it for the awareness piece as well as the understanding of the challenges of the district, especially with House Bill 3 and our demographic challenges there
Board of Trustees,
for
That's
those
present.
present.
of those present voting, okay. Maybe premature, but do you see yourself proposing that we approve that?
Right now, it's
As well, instead of just voting in August, or
agency audit are still not determined, and we have to do that. We have to report the efficiency audit findings no later than 60 days prior to the election. It's getting tight. So,
Here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're
Totally misunderstood that.
Yeah, not the TRE, the penny on the M&O.
So it's, again, the purpose of tonight's conversation was to talk about big rocks and rules of assessment of what we'll actually do. And just a reminder, the revenue number, as I said just a few minutes ago, will fluctuate. We are on the 12th version of the funding template, and it will not be the last version of the funding template. So it will change as more and more is revealed by the agency and put through the funding formats.
But if I may, but to Gary's point, there's nothing that you presented here tonight that indicates that we could not use the 1.8 million. Is there anything you presented tonight that leads me to believe otherwise, that we don't need the 1.8 million?
As it sits tonight, the purpose for tonight was the awareness of where we sit, what's available to us. So I'm not answering.
So I'll jump in. Mr. Westbrook, yes, we could use additional revenue. We could use additional revenue for our students to compensate our staff, to deal with the increase in healthcare costs. What we don't know right now is what are the sources of revenue, but then as we go through, we'll see what other revenue is available for us, and we'll look at our people, as you guys well know.
other questions?
The number of pages on here. I thought Stan Hall had come back. Master of the PowerPoint. That's where the phrase "just say no" came from.
Any other questions? Mr. Pruski and team, thank you guys so much. I've seen it evolve over the last few weeks in my Friday meetings as well. When we had 112, I'm like, we might want to narrow. But y'all did a wonderful, very informative, wonderful job. And this pairs perfectly with going into our combined advisory community meetings. I'd encourage, yes, on the 13th, and this might even be good to attach to those two committees that are coming if they wanted to preview just the budget stuff, just so they would know some of the demographic. Not that they have to watch it, but at least that would be maybe something, because this is very informative and kind of helps when you're looking at a 10-year plan and multiple things like that. All that plays in together, the demographics, where things are going to be built. And so that is not a board meeting. There will be 3 board members there. But that, again, I said that was live streamed and also will be recorded and put on the website so those can watch it at any time after that. Yes. At this time, we're going to allow for any public feedback regarding the information that was presented by our leadership team, our public. Any feedback?
Mr. President, I think the last board meeting you mentioned that we're about to do another demographic study.
That's going to be at the CCAC meeting. We got a little bit of the preliminary, but that'll be fully, he's actually presenting, correct? At this next, the 13th. So that'll go into, because I'm even being asked by the public of, where the growth is.
That's going to be live streamed.
Yes, and that's going to be live streamed as well, and then they can watch it later for recording.
Let's think, when we're looking at a projected 100 student increase, I think for the person off the street, that just doesn't sound feasible. But that's what the numbers look like so far, and new demographics.
Again, like everybody said, that could change too.
Yeah.
Those homes south of 10 could blow us up in a heartbeat.
anything else? All right. Then we are adjourned at 7:08.
Thank you, Mike.